If I could only have one. What's up guys, KS here. Thanks for joining me today as always. In September of 2017, Glock released its Generation 5 Models 17 and 19 with mediocre reception from many consumers and reviewers. The list of gripes was long, but the overwhelming theme was that Glock wasn't innovating like other gun manufacturers. To be honest, I thought they were fine guns, but too was hoping for something a bit more outside the box for Glock, but that's not how they do things. In January of 2018, Glock pushed on with the civilian release of the military MHS trial runner-up, the 19X. Once again, the gun was met with many scoffs from the market, but Glock has recently reported that sales of the 19X has greatly exceeded expectations. Generation 5 models 26 and 34 followed suit later in the year. For me, as often with miniguns, I have to warm up to them. I was excited for the Gen 5 models, but found a few features either odd or frankly uncomfortable. The 19X was the first of the new models that I took to pretty quickly, and it forced me to reconsider my thoughts on other Gen 5 models, and frankly, now I'm on board. Yes, I know there are many who say they peaked with the Gen 3, but I disagree. I know it had a good trigger, but there were many other attributes I was not as fond of. Now, Glock has stepped out of their usual model number nomenclature and released the Model 45. A 9mm, taking some of the best features of the Gen 5 and the 19X with the sprinkling of the Gen 4 19FS. Although again, the reception has been lukewarm, I think they may have another hit on their hands. Let's dive in and take a look. Okay, as you can see, I've widened the frame just a little bit and brought out a couple of extra guns. I'm not a big fan of doing that, guys. I really am not, and I'm going to get rid of them as soon as I can, but I thought it'd be a good idea to have a little bit of a visual representation of some of the different models here because of some of the features that they've done with the 45. So we're going to start with the 19X for just a moment or two, just to give you an idea. And of course, I normally run through the spec numbers and all that, but I'm not going to do it this time. I think by now we're pretty familiar with the 19X, and so the 45 does the exact same thing. Carries forward that 19 slide with the 17 frame. Try and line these guys up as best I can, and they are basically identical. So just to give you an idea of the size, that sort of thing, hopefully that helps a little bit. And then we're going to jump right into the features because again, there are some combinations of some of these different guns into the 45. Now in terms of the grip frame texture right here, we carried forward our Gen 4 and Gen 5 texture, and I'm a fan of this. I think it does the right combination of grippy enough without so over textured that it's going to beat you up or beat your clothes up or anything like that, but the gun stays very planted in there, so I like that grip texture quite a bit. Now, it does come with some different back straps just like your Gen 4's Gen 5, so there's a little bit of modularity there as well, so if you've got bigger hands, that sort of thing, you can make the appropriate adjustments. Now, one feature that they carried forward from the Gen 5s rather than the 19X is actually the Magwell, and I like this. I think it's a good feature. Now, I know some people say that it's going to lead to more printing. Well, that perhaps is a little bit true, but I like the idea of just having a little bit more help being able to throw in a new magazine if you need to, and I think it's actually kind of a cool look as well. One thing that is absent, however, from the 45, just to give you guys an idea, is this little cutout on the Gen 5. This is a Gen 5 19, and this cutout was one of the few gripes I have of the Gen 5s. It's not that big of a deal, but you can feel it when you're shooting a little bit. It's not painful or anything, but I'm not a fan. I know it was there to help strip the magazines, more on that in a moment, but I just wasn't a fan. So instead, they closed it up, and so I was very glad to see that. I like that quite a bit, but what they didn't do was carry forward the lip that's on the 19X. I'm going to show you that, and we're going to nerd out for a moment or two. Of course, the 45 comes with three 17-round magazines, but with these magazines, and it's the other gripe I have with the Gen 5s. You guys will notice that the 45 magazine, same as the Gen 5s on the left, is a little bit longer than the older 17 magazines, which is what this is right here. So it's got a longer lip on it, and again, that's part of that being able to strip out the magazines for malfunction. So I get the idea behind it, but the problem is with the 19X, which carries the 17 magazine as well, you'll notice that it won't fully seat in there. And that is a big gripe of mine. I think for the modern Glocks, they should all be interchangeable. So they can. And so basically what I do with all my Gen 5 magazines, I actually go back to the old base plates on that. So I either do the old base plates or I do these +2s right here. That just makes more sense for me, and it eliminates the confusion of magazines. All right, I've gotten rid of the other guns and brought the camera in just a little bit closer to talk about some of the controls. Now, in terms of your magazine release, it is just the same as it ever was with Glocks right here. It is reversible, although not ambi out of the box. And it's the Gen 4, Gen 5 style, a little bit bigger button right there, and I like it. It does just exactly what it needs to do, and it's a good placement and all that kind of good stuff. And then we've got our slide lock slide release, which is ambi out of the box. So for all of you left-hand shooters, this is definitely a lot more friendly for you. So I think a lot of people were really excited to see that introduced in the Gen 5. Now, in terms of takedown, it does have your standard Glock tabs as you would expect. You pull the trigger, pull the slide back about 1/8 of an inch, and then it pops right off. I'm not going to do it for this video because we've seen it over and over and over again. So to save time, we'll just move on. And then we do have our accessory rail for tiny ninjas, chainsaws, lasers, all that kind of good stuff. So just exactly what you would expect. And then there is a little bit of texture on the front of the trigger guard. So for those of you who want to put your finger there, and if that's your style, that's there for you to use. I really think that this is the right combination of features for the frame, and I really like what they've done with it. In terms of the slide, the 45 carries forward the Gen 4 FS model forward serrations or front serrations, and I was really glad to see them do that. I was a big fan of the serrations. I'm not a big press checker, so in terms of function, it really doesn't serve a purpose. However, I think it's a better look. A lot of people go out and mill their slides anyway, so Glock has kind of taken that upon themselves. Now, I think it'd be really cool if they were a little bit slanted or something like that, but at the end of the day, at least it breaks up the slide. It's a little bit less blocky, and also, in terms of less blocky, they've kept the scalloped front of the slide, and I like that as well. It makes it easier to put back in the holster, that sort of thing, and I think it just cleans up the look a little bit. And once again, they line the frame up properly. That was a big gripe of some of the early Gen 5. So I think Glock was thoughtful in putting this together appropriately, and the only other difference is, of course, it says 45, getting much of that ire with the 45 caliber versus 9mm, which is what this is. But I like this. I think it's a good combination. Now, for sights, my gun did come with the regular polymer sights, so I chose right off the bat to go with some Trijicon HD XRs for this. I really like those sights quite a bit. It's got the thin front post with the HD callout on it. It is tritium, so it's a night sight, of course, and then we've got our rear with our two tritium vials, and it's serrated a little bit, so I'm a big fan of these sights or sights that are similar to these. And otherwise, that's your slide. I really like this slide quite a bit. It's a good look. It's good function. I think they did the right thing with it. One last thing on the slide before we move on, they did carry forward the Gen 5 NDLC coating, and that's going to be a pretty hardy coating. It's pretty robust from what I understand and from what I've experienced with my other Gen 5, but that means it's going to be really slick too. So without those serrations, I will tell you, I can't grab the slide. Now my hands are a little bit sweaty being under the lights and working on this video, but again, those serrations help a little bit. Now I like the coating otherwise because it's pretty strong, but I'm not so fond of the fact that it's a little slick. So again, serrations are a welcome addition, but that's it for your slide. The shooting experience with the G45 was exactly as expected. It's a Glock and it shoots like a Glock. Now I realize that's not a profound statement, but if you have trigger time behind them, they all shoot about the same. The ergos and grip angle remain unchanged since the Generation 4, but one subtle difference I have noticed, however, and this is the same with all other Gen 5s I've shot or handled at the local toy store, Centerfire Shooting Sports, the trigger to me is noticeably better. We'll dive deeper into it in just a moment, but I will say that it's a little lighter and mildly crisper than previous generations. On a more personal note, I was disappointed in my first shooting with the 45. Although all hits were on target, I had more flyers than I'd prefer. Now, I was probably a little bit overexcited and perhaps it just wasn't my day. I do find that the shooting sports are an up and down type of thing, and some days you leave elated, and some days you're ready for a new hobby. Okay, that might be an exaggeration. My shots certainly qualify for defensive marksmanship, quality hits, center mass, but I was hoping for more big holes in the center of the paper, right? That's where the real fun is. I'll return to redeem myself, I'm sure. Now, for more of my thoughts on accuracy, check out that video somewhere in the channel library. Aside from all that, the G45 will do exactly as it's intended to do, run without a complaint. And that's probably why we like Glocks so much. Okay, now I just made a bit of a bold statement saying that I feel like the trigger on this one's a little bit better than some of the other Glocks that I've tried or shot or own. Now, one thing with Glocks, there are tolerance differences between every single one of them. So some triggers are going to feel just a tiny bit different than others, even though the basics are all the same. So we've got our take-up right here, and it's a smooth take-up. I can feel that spring working, however. And then we get to a really nice defined wall. And there's your break. And this one's coming in at about 5.5 pounds, and a lot of Glocks come in somewhere a little bit closer to 6, but it's very smooth. It's pretty light and crisp. And then our reset is right there. Now, I'm going to put it back to the start in a moment, but I just want to say that it's right at the wall. And that's a quality of a trigger with any manufacturer that I really like. When they put it right at the wall, that's a big thing because it makes for faster follow-up shots just like that. And you're ready to go, and you've got your reset again. It's ready, but then we get back out to the start. So really, as far as Glock triggers go, this one's pretty good. And I found that the Gen 5 and the 19X triggers are definitely a little bit better, in my opinion, than some of the previous generations. Now, I say that knowing that Glock triggers always leave a little bit of room for improvement for sure. So the next time you see the 45, it will be apexed with a good-looking red trigger on it. I'm a huge fan of Apex, as you guys know, and it just dials it in a little bit more, makes it a little bit more comfortable with that flat face. So again, next time you see it, it will be red apexed. So guys, what do I think of the Glock 45 overall? Well, overall, I like it, and I like it a lot. I think it's the right combination of features between the Gen 5s, the Gen 4 FS models, and the 19X thrown all together, and I think it's a really good gun. Now, it's going to take a while for me to get used to saying the 45 versus the 19 or 17 or something like that, but that day will come, no big deal. But again, I think it's a great gun. The only thing that I would change on it, believe it or not, I would make it FDE, but I like FDE a lot. But otherwise, I think it's great. I'm excited to throw that Apex trigger in there and do some more work with it, redeem myself on the range, and bring some more footage to you guys at a later time. But most importantly, I'm looking forward to your comments. Do you guys like the 45? Do you not like the 45? I want to hear that feedback for sure. If you've got some experience with the 45 already, be sure to share those down in the comments. Sound off for sure. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you guys. I always do. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.